You see this in a lot of institutions, but I don't think that anything displays this more, or very few institutions display this element of the way culture intersects with our value system and the way institutions behave. How the president as a human being as well as an office embodies some of the ideas of the American dreams, things like that. So what the White House represents is sort of a representation of a certain percentage of people and how they think. Now, one of the things that we need to separate out is this concept of the office of the presidency and the person. And we'll talk a little bit more about the intersection between individual personalities down here at the bottom and cultural and social institutions. Let me ask you this question. Obama's, one of his campaign slogans was, "Yes, we can." What did he mean by that, and how did that fit into American culture, and did he accomplish what he set out to do? Maybe it should, yes, we can. Let me put it this way. Would he have been elected going, maybe we can? Sort of. You know, if you want a half-assed president, you just give me a call. I'll go on vacation 4 months out of the first year I'm in office. And I'll make sure to raise money when I should be doing your duty. Do you think the president really wanted to do that? Let's go back to the first question. What's that yes, we can stuff? I don't think they say that stuff in Russia. I don't think Putin's going, yes, we can. He's saying, you better listen, or else. That's Putin. Like, you can violate the law. You'll never be heard from again. A lot of countries don't. I doubt the Chinese leaders are saying, yes, we can. Do you? Maybe the North Korean leader. Yes, we can. Start a nuclear war. And with all due respect to North Korea, who's really trying to start a nuclear war on the peninsula? The United States, I probably shouldn't say it, doing as much rabble-rousing as anybody is. What does that represent in American culture? Yes, we can. What the hell does that mean? You got elected on it. Don't look at me like nothing's going on. You're in this class for a reason, not just saying here. And I love the camera because then it proves exactly what I say, that people don't read so they don't comment. Break the mold. Yes. Tell me your name.
Josh.
Go ahead, Josh.
I guess we're trying to appeal to the fact, I guess, because as American culture, there's this thing of united we stand, divided we fall.
Also, are Americans somewhat, at least the very minimum, they like their president to be optimistic? You don't want some negative idiot up there saying ridiculous crap like, you know what, the best days of America are past. We only hope to contain some of the issues and, ameliorate the damage that's been done. You start talking like that, I think that was part of John Kerry's problem. He couldn't keep his mouth shut. Okay? Even Hitler knew that you keep your sound bites simple and short. You don't sit there and prognosticate about every other... I support gay marriage except for the 19 following points. That's the way John Kerry talked. And being married to the ketchup lady didn't help either. How did Barack Obama's life and his life story fit with what we believe as Americans? The meritocracy, for example, is something that Americans value. It was one of the reasons why a lot of people didn't like George Bush. Because it appeared that he didn't earn what he had. He certainly didn't earn any of that money. He was a failed businessman repeatedly. The only thing he did worthwhile in his whole entire life was the Texas Rangers, which, by the way, I believe, didn't he trade Sammy Sosa? I swear, although he was probably on steroids at the time. So. He might have traded A-Rod, or maybe that was afterwards. But how did Obama's, what's his life story? Tell me his life story. Tell me part of his life story. Okay. It's not the only place he lived. He actually lived in Indonesia, too. Give me his background. Who is he?
He was a poor kid that grew up with a single mom, biracial parents, but an absentee father.
Who went back to Kenya and eventually died in a car accident when Obama was, I think, 22 or 23? Barely had any contact with his father's side of the family.
And he represents the American dream.
To some extent. I mean, here is not only a poor man, poor kid, but a poor biracial, not even just black or white, biracial kid who probably grew up, people teasing him because he had a white mom or something like that. I can't expect that even with the liberalness in Hawaii at the time, and there are a lot of Asian people in Hawaii, natives and things that live in Hawaii, so it's a pretty diverse population. Even with that, I'm sure he got cracked. By the way, here's for the camera. He admitted when he was in high school to smoking marijuana and doing cocaine. Why is that a bad message that parents probably wouldn't want to hear him say out in public? By the way, he smoked cigarettes too. Which not necessarily going to kill you, because Tommy Franks smoked 2 packs of cigarettes a day and drank 15 cups of coffee and lived, he's still alive. Why don't parents want to hear that from the president? Why don't they want the truth? Somebody said over here. Yes.
Because they always say, oh, you can be the president someday, and they don't want you to.
As long as you don't do drugs.
Yes.
As long as you don't break the law, don't do drugs, even if you think it's fun for a little while. Also, that anybody who tries cocaine, what happens to you? Isn't this what parents say? You can either die or get addicted. Is the president addicted to cocaine? He might be. I don't know what he does with his free time. Okay? You think the service, the Secret Service? That was always the joke about President Bush. You ever seen his nose, the way his nostrils are constantly flared? It looked like somebody eat his nose up. Okay? So on, and Clinton has been accused of this too. I love this. Our last 3 presidents have all done drugs. All of them. Every single one of them. In Bush's case, God knows how many drugs he did. Okay. I can't imagine he was. I think he's much smarter than the public and the press give him credit for, but it's not a very far fall for him to go doing cocaine and destroy his brain. So I don't know, and his dad actually never even thought he was smart anyway. And I would say to Harvard, then why did you let him into your MBA program? I mean, that's the biggest question that comes up. So again, one of the reasons why Obama was able to win the election is he was able to articulate these elements that I am more relatable, I am more closer to the reality that you know as America, and I display all these other characteristics that I was born in poverty, I did drugs and was confused and angry in high school. Anna didn't even mention, anybody know what happened to his mom? Actually, the same thing happened to me, almost the exact same age. When he was about 20-some years old.
She died
or
of
18 or 19. Huh?
She died of breast cancer.
Right. Believe it or not, I hate to draw this parallel, but that's happened to a lot of world leaders. Hitler and Stalin's mom both died when they were young. I mean, and when your mother dies, when somebody that close to you, because I'm sure it bothered him when his father died, but he wasn't that close. When your mother dies, and those of you that have experienced this or know friends that have experienced it, I haven't experienced this personally, there's nothing that anybody can say to make the feeling go away. What are you guys doing? You guys are like staring around trying to read somebody's notes or something like that.
No, I'm trying to read.
Oh, okay. All right. It's online. You can download it and then put it on. It's under content. Go under content. Okay. Anyway, but that is a devastating blow to someone's life. And there's usually 1 or 2 ways you can go. You can spiral down into depression and anger and resentment and hate the world because you don't have a mother and everybody else has one. I'll tell you right now, one of the worst days of the year for me is Mother's Day. It just pisses me off. Not because of what it is, but because everybody asks me whether or not I called my mom. Yeah, hello? Spiritual world? Can I talk to my mom? Okay, take that camera. Deal with the pain. It's not easy, and I can tell by the look on your face that most of you don't have a response to what I just said and how I feel. Okay, and you can either spiral down into madness, like Hitler did, and there were a lot of other things going on. Hitler's father abused him so badly, he was in a coma for 9 days at one point. He was alcoholic. The one positive thing is that Obama appears to have had positive influence in his life, primarily his grandmother. Okay. And was able to, I believe, take parts of American culture to give him confidence to go forward that, hey, he knew that if he tried hard enough, or at least this is what he believed, that he would at very minimum succeed. Maybe he didn't think he was going to be the President of the United States. Maybe he did. Who knows? But he got there. Okay? Has he fulfilled his promise? Somebody give you an argument that Obama has done what he could, but the system won't let him. What's up with it? What is this thing called the system? It's like a monster or something. What do you think happened when he got into office? He's like, I'm going to change things. What did the bureaucracy say to him? What did the military say to him? I don't think so. You better sit down and be quiet. We've been here for 20 years. You've been here for 2 minutes. You're only going to be here for 8 years if you're lucky. So sit down and shut up, because we're going to let you in on what's happening, man. You don't make any decisions without our permission. You think you're in control? You're not in control. You control nothing. That's probably why he doesn't like to spend time in Washington. You notice he's never in Washington, which bothers me. I would say this one thing to tell you about the. I keep harping on this idea of the constant campaigning. You know how your representatives, especially House members, are all constantly campaigning. You know what stuff like that leads to? The national security announcement that suggested that there was the national intelligence estimate that said that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction and therefore got us into the war on terror, or the war in Iraq, instead of finishing the job in Afghanistan, was actually available. The entire report was available for every member of the House and Senate to read. They didn't do it. Can you guess why? And had they done it, they wouldn't have made the decision to go to war in Iraq. Why do you think that they didn't have time to sit down and read a 500-page report? That's right, because they were too busy shaking people's hands and kissing people's asses. I mean, these people, you know, if some of these guys have mustaches, it must smell like feces, because they've got their heads so far up people's asses. I don't know how they can breathe. I used to say something similar about George Bush. I don't know how he goes to the bathroom with Dick Cheney's hand shoved up his ass, making his mouth move. The president doesn't make a lot of decisions. I mean, it's unfortunate that he gets blamed. The president always gets way too much credit and way too much blame for things that go wrong. You know? And when they're sitting around raising money and campaigning instead of doing work, nothing gets done. And that leads to the state of dissatisfaction that people have towards the government, that they're bungling morons, they only care about self-preservation. And that because of they're constantly campaigning, the real people who have power in Washington are who? You think? That some people... Who would conflict theorists say have real power in Washington? It ain't the elected politicians. Those people are just seat warmers. Who really has the power? It was in your last chapter for what we were supposed to read for Wednesday. Who has power? Yeah, but represented by who? What kind of an organization? No, I mean technically yes, you're right in the sense that corporations lobby, and the lobbyists don't get elected, so they're there constantly. They can build solid relationships with new and old House members. Who in Washington among the government?
The military.
Okay, you guys are kind of circling around it.
Like public relations advisors.
That's part of it. You guys are thinking too micro. Think macro. Huh? Yeah, the bureaucracy. This nameless, faceless horde of individuals sitting in their big, gigantic granite buildings that probably cost way too much money to build. Why does the Supreme Court need like this magnificent palace? Who the hell do these people think they are, Zeus? You ever been to Washington? What a waste of money that garbage is. I mean, if you're going to house degenerate, corrupt people, you might as well just let them, sit in an outhouse or something like that. I mean, if you're going to sell bullshit, it should smell like it all day too, But the bigger issue is, you guys are sitting there laughing, and probably some of you are like, how can you say that about the government? Name something the federal government has done right. Took the Navy SEALs to get Obama. They're not bureaucrats. Name something they've done right. They certainly didn't do anything right on September 11th, did they? All these morons had to do was stop these idiots. Where was the INS? Where was the airport security? I mean, give me a break. Where was the CIA? Where was the FBI? We paid people hundreds of thousands of dollars apiece to go look for these people. And these morons were wandering around this country for 2 years. So when people say don't criticize the bureaucracy, tell me something you've done for the American people. And Marx said, and again, I'm expressing the conflict theory view, Marx said eventually that type of inaction And the attitude of the bureaucracy that we're better and we don't need to do anything, and the only thing we need to do is protect our job would lead to a revolution. And when Marx says revolution, he doesn't mean tickling people until they give in. He means blood in the streets. He means slashing people's throats. He means hanging people by piano wire. Okay? He means blood this thick in the streets up to your knees. And go ask Russia what happens when people get sick of their government. Go ask France what happens. Remember the Reign of Terror? They were that was like, what are you doing this Friday? You going to see a beheading? I love the fact that people think that video games and television makes people violent. What video games was Genghis Khan watching? What television was Hitler watching? I don't think Stalin was playing World of Warcraft. Okay? He was playing it for real. And he was the Dark Knight, right? The Shadow Knight, or whatever. Just murdering people left and right. Anyway. So the bureaucracy pretty much on some levels has a power, and that's the attitude, again, this is conflict theory's perspective, that the bureaucracy is a power structure that is not accountable to the American people. Can you fire people in the Department of Defense? Can you elect them or unelect them or anything like that? You can't do anything to these people. And how many people here, either somebody you know is a high school teacher in the New York public school system, or you're going to be one? How hard is it to fire somebody as a public school teacher? What's the process? It's absolutely impossible. And if you can't fire a school teacher for molesting a child, what chance do you have about getting rid of a bureaucrat because they're lazy? Are you starting to see the problem why our government spends $4.4 trillion on and gets nothing done? You think they spend $4.4 trillion to be all living in mansions with robots cleaning our houses, which, by the way, I have a robot that cleans my house. But it wasn't made by the government. Because if they did, it would have broke. And you know what it would have done? It wouldn't have broke. It would have spit dirt out. It would have made the floor dirtier. And then said, please, for a real vacuum cleaner, call this government department. And they'll hook you up with another machine that will make even more of a mess. That is why Ronald Reagan made such headway in the 1980s by saying this, although he didn't put it into action. Government is not the solution to the problem. Government is the problem. I don't know if I agree with that. I certainly think conflict theorists would agree with a lot of that. You certainly have a lot of anarchists and communists who believe that. It was funny because communists are actually, many of them are socialists. Anyway, but let's move on to talk about the chapters today. So just to make sure everybody's reading, what were the two chapters about today? This should be a pretty easy question without opening your book. This isn't rocket science. What were the chapters about? What was one of them about? Marriage and family. What was the other one? Two other institutions. What was it about? Huh? In economic institutions. Why do you think they slammed politics and economics together? Seems kind of weird. Aren't those separate realities? You can't confuse the president with the CEO of a corporation, can you? Why would you put political and economic institutions together and deal with them at the same time? Yes.
Because they go hand in hand for the most part. Because the political institutions are really in charge of the economy.
Yeah, go ask Somalia what happens when you have an economy without a government, in terms of the piracy. And go ask Albania what happens when you have a government without an economy. At one point, Albania had 90% unemployment. I don't even know how that's possible, but they did. I doubt that's what it is now. Okay? Go ask the Soviet Union what happens when you have a government and no economy. You fall apart. So, one cannot, many people suggest, one cannot exist without the other. You cannot have an economy without a government. You cannot have a government without an economy. And you cannot have a situation where the government is at war with the economy, or, here's the great thing about this. You can't have an economy that's at war with the government, or the government at war with the economy, and you cannot have another situation where you have business and government colluding. Can you? You know what that's called when government and business collude? It's called fascism. Where they game the system. And who gets hurt? Everybody else. Go ask the Germans who weren't Nazis what happened to them from 1939 to 1945. I don't think they had a fun time when the Russian soldiers came in and raped 1/3 of the women in Berlin. You think the Russians were in the mood to be friendly after 20 million of their people had been annihilated by the Nazis? Right? So again, so let's go back. So it's important to understand the connections between economics and politics. We will discuss that as we go along, especially with the time bind. Now remember, chapters 1 and 2 in the time bind for Wednesday. We will deal with some more of the specifics of the intersection book on Wednesday, because we're going to look at some of what Early Hochschild is describing. We're going to look at some of the statistics in the intersection book, particularly how many children are on things like daycare, how much time do people spend there, what are people's views about work, the work world versus family. Okay? We'll talk about what she means by the time bind, so we'll get to all that. But before we do that, we're going to talk a little in a general sense. Now, frankly, we could go on with an entire year-long class on this issue. This is one of the great debates in sociology to some extent. First of all, what's the difference between culture and social institutions? And what's the relationship between these two things? And just like politics and economics, even though they're very distinct, they're still so closely interrelated that it's very difficult to talk about one without the other. Okay? In the past, the political system was the economic system, or the Catholic Church or something controlled the economic system or the political system. Okay? Also, in general, though, there is this sense that you can have a culture without formal institutions. Can anybody name me a society that had a situation like that? Where there was no formal institutions, meaning stuff like this. Like, for example, in ancient times, who would be teaching this class? Some of you don't know personally? In ancient times, traditional societies, Native American tribes, who would be teaching this class? First of all, it wouldn't be in the classroom, would it? This isn't rocket science. I don't understand the blank stares. Who would be teaching this class?
The leader of the tribe or organization.
Who would be related to you by what?
Blood.
Or marriage. Right? So again, did Native American tribes have buildings where the people went to school? Let me ask you even a more fundamental question than that. Did most Native American tribes even have settlements? You can see why in Florida why you wouldn't build cities, couldn't you? I always think that the conquistadors showed up in Florida, and the Seminole tribe went, "Hey, what's going on?" And I bet the conquistadors were like, "How come you don't have any cities? There's a lot of people here." Like, you'll understand here when it gets to August. I'm like, "What's that mean?" Just don't worry about it. We'll see you guys later. We're going to go up to Georgia from August till November. I'm like, why? Oh, nothing. Don't worry about it. Then a hurricane came through and knocked everything down. The conquistadors were like, "Oh, we see now. I understand this now." Okay? So it was much more about adapting to your environment, just getting the basic minimum what you need. And I don't need a federal government when there's only 400 people in the tribe, do I? I don't need a police force. Okay? I don't need a military. And most of the time, do I even specialize labor? Do I have a set of hunters and a set of religious people and a set of people making clothes? Is that the way it is? It evolves into that, but what's it start out as? Yeah, it's a generalist society where even women get involved in production, whereas even in agricultural societies, women do house stuff. Not in pioneer days. I'll tell you that right now. There's plenty of women who could chop more wood than their husbands back then. Alright? That's what I love. People get this impression because you've been partly brainwashed by high school history, which is the word. Let me put it this way. You could take a few facts that you learned in high school and take all the other garbage that they told you and flush it down the toilet. Okay? Because in this society, women have not always been subservient. That happened in the 1940s and 50s. And in the early part of the 1900s. Okay? In the 1840s and 50s, if you were a female child, it was demanded that you did real work. You'd have calluses on your hands. It was no different. And I'm sure there was a lot of girls at the time, like 12 or 13, going, I can't do what he can do. And the dad or the mom was like, so? Okay, so things have changed. We specialize labor now. Whereas, think about, would I have time to do sociological research if I had to go get all the water I needed for the day and make my own food and kill it? and clean it and try to store it and then make my own clothes and repair my own house. You see the issue here? And in urban societies, very early on, from Egypt on, people decided, hey, let's make these people farmers because they're good at it. Let's make these people entertainers because they're good at it. And not only that, if I make these people farmers and they're good at it, what's eventually going to happen over time to their abilities? They're going to get better and better. Part of the issue is, though, and this is kind of a postmodern condition, what happens to people in society when they have completely different jobs and different perspectives on life and they have different goals? What starts to happen? Whereas before in a tribe where everybody was doing similar things, there was a lot of cohesion, wasn't there? What happens when the lawyers only hang out with lawyers and accountants only hang out with accountants and plumbers only hang out with plumbers and construction workers? What happens there? What happens? Go ahead.
Division.
Right. So you get divides, you get separations, you get people not talking to each other, and the society can potentially start to spin apart. So with that in mind, we have this idea here that, look, we can have a culture without institutions, but it's very difficult to have institutions without a culture. Institutions are constructed, the boundaries and their functions are defined by culture, and just as importantly, what culture represents on a lot of levels. Because we talk about culture being values and artifacts and things people believe. When it breaks down to it, you want to know what culture really is made up on a large level, at least symbolic culture, non-material culture, ideologies. What are ideologies and why are they important? Someone name one and tell me why it's important. There's plenty of them. They usually end with the word ism. Enough isms in this world to kill everybody. So what are some ideological, and these are, first of all, I'll answer the question for you. Ideologies are value systems that prescribe certain behaviors based, in this case, on social institutions. And that dictate how people should behave within that system and what's right or wrong to believe. So let's take capitalism. What's this system about? Which institution does it pertain to? I just gave it away. Right, and corporations. What's the philosophy of capitalism? What are some of the values that it's built on?
Free trade.
Okay, there's something even more fundamental. It's actually displayed in sports. Yeah. Well, what is the philosophy? Because communists take a completely different view of competition. What's the philosophy of competition?
Creates demand.
Sort of, but not completely. I would say people's need for physical things creates demand.
Competition supplies demand.
Okay, well, it certainly will supply something, yes.
Kind of like survival of the fittest.
To some extent, yes. But in general, one of the reasons you got to ask yourself: would a system exist if it was just about providing material objects and survival? What really is capitalism about? Achieving what for the individual? We'll talk about this as we go along. Not just starving. Yeah, it's your dreams. And that competition makes society better by two counts. One, rewarding those who play within the system and are intelligent and creative. And two, punishing people for making stupid mistakes, like opening a restaurant in the middle of a recession, or lending money to bad banks in Greece or something like that. The problem is, the political institutions always get involved because they're democratic, and they say, uh-oh, the economy's going down, the voters are going to be mad. So they come in and they mess up the system. And they go, you know what, AIG can't fail, even though they made horrendous decisions. This is like your government saying, well, you know what, McDonald's poisoned 50,000 people, but we'll still let them exist. Do you see how when you flip the analogy of like if you look at the bank, if the bank bailout was bailing out fast food restaurants, would it have happened? If it was bailing out Walmart, would it have happened? I don't think so. Okay? And now it's back to the power elite theory to some extent. So if we go on this idea here that institutions are, culture is needed to guide your behavior, and we use these large ideological systems, capitalism, democracy, Christianity is another one. Ideas of the Enlightenment, like individual rights or humanitarianism. Okay, even vegetarianism is a philosophy of life. Environmentalism is an ideology that we use, right? Even materialism. Okay, some of these isms are very bad. A lot of people consider communism and socialism to be terrible. Anyway, other people think democracy's got some serious problems. Okay? Let me put it this way. If Germany had still been a monarchy, there would have been no Hitler. He would have been strong enough to overthrow the government. Anyway, sociologists have long debated the relationship between culture and social institutions, with the following statements recurring over and over again, these questions, issues. Number one, culture and social institutions cannot be separated from each other in any real effective manner. Institutions are guided by culture. Also, institutions create culture. They disseminate culture. Let's take a look at an example of this to show you how these things are integrated. That's point number 2. On the 4th of July, what do we celebrate? What happens if you don't celebrate? There's some kind of bah humbug, Scrooge, your July 4th Scrooge, or there's a movie waiting, and the ghosts of the founding fathers come and teach you a lesson. Look out, Dickens. What could we call it? An Independence Day Christmas Carol? I don't think that would work. The real Independence Day, not the one with Will Smith. But obviously the Pentagon has watched way too much. So we celebrate what? Somebody said freedom. What do you get accused of if you don't celebrate? Here's another ism. Patriotism. Schools are supposed to be objective, right? They're supposed to care about what's the truth and not propaganda. Do schools do schools at least teach about the meaning of the 4th of July? No, the school's usually not in session. What celebrations take place? So we got schools on the hook. They're teaching this July 4th stuff. Families teach us, right? The government goes out and talks about this. What happens on that day? What do people do? Who pays for the fireworks? Where do the But I thought there was a law against shooting off fireworks. So I love it. This shows you the power of culture in these. What 4th of July represents is kind of a cultural remembrance movement. This is what we consider important, right? And the state not only spends your tax money to buy fireworks from Grucci, who, believe it or not, I had one of his nieces in my class. She said he was probably, never mind, I'm not even going to say it. Get a hold of it. I'm more afraid of him than the president, frankly. Anyway, the president probably just want to talk to me. Grucci. Wrap me up in fireworks, send me in the moon or something. So, but I've heard it's like a monopoly, that there's not much competition. This guy controls most of the fireworks. So they pay him your tax dollars, and then they violate their own law. They allow it to be violated. It reminds me of when the NFL was allowing players to tweet on the sidelines of the Pro Bowl. When any other time during the game, it's a no. And some people say, well, isn't that great? That's mixed signals to me, is what it says. That we want Twitter's attention, we want the publicity, but we want you doing it on the field. And if they did, shout out to Cinco. That's about the only thing he's doing for the Patriots, is Twitter and tweeting or whatever it is. Anyway. But again, so we have this issue of the 4th of July. You have the state involved on almost every level. Do corporations get involved? How about Grucci? And it's always like, this 4th of July fireworks display is proudly brought to you by, what's his name? Is his name Felix? Grucci, a real patriot who loves America and whose product is not legally allowed to be sold. Is there any counties where fireworks are allowed to be sold? And I thought they could sell them on Native American reservations. But as soon as you,
I just passed one in South Carolina.
but you can't take them off. This is how dumb the law is. There's laws like this. You can have fireworks, but you can't buy them. Or you can let them off on certain days, but not others. Or you can buy them from Native American reservations and let them off there. But if you dare to set foot off of the property, it's like with Mexico with switchblades. You can buy switchblades right across the border, and you come across the border to America, now you're a criminal. Having said that, I should say it's funny. I smuggled a switchblade out of there. Because they didn't think it. I was 12 at the time, and don't ask me why. First of all, they were selling switchblades to 12-year-olds. Okay, and fireworks too. I bought a bunch of fireworks. But in Arizona, fireworks is nothing. It's not a big deal. But again, look at this though. And even the stores get on it. They have 4th of July sales. They always have the car dealership down the streets. Always go, come on in for July 4th madness. Right? It's a big deal. And just like Christmas though, a lot of people criticize it and say the true meaning of the 4th of July has been lost. It was one of the reasons why they didn't want to make 9/11 a national holiday, because they thought it would turn into something like that. Like President's Day. That's not so a flower store down the street can have a sale. Or Walmart can, okay? But I'm telling you right now, go to Tanger Outlet on every one of these goofy holidays, from Memorial Day to Labor Day to the 4th of July to Valentine's Day, there's a sale at a Tanger Outlet on something. And on here's like the reverse. On Valentine's Day, instead of things going down, roses like triple in price. And see, the men are shaking their head. The ladies don't know how much roses cost. Probably most of you don't care. They're expensive, okay? Sometimes they charge $100. So next time your boyfriend buys you a box of long stem roses, or just one of them, know that that costs probably more than the date. I mean, frankly, would you have roses? I'd rather go to a Broadway show. I mean, it's the same amount of money, you know? I mean, gosh. Take a trip to France for as much as some of this stuff costs. Anyway, but then institutions are tied up in disseminating culture. We learn about who we are by being in school, by being around our family. Now, many of these institutions are much more informal, and many of these beliefs are just out in the public. Ideas of capitalism and democracy and the meritocracy and equality and all this, and freedom and individualism, right? These are all parts of American culture. They all sort of fit together into one story. And all of them are somewhat promoted. And as you see here, there is an intense, integrated, and circular relationship between culture and social institutions, meaning culture informs and sets the nature, function, and value system that gives social institutions their power. That's a misspelling, sorry. Focus and meaning, but institutions, especially dominant ones like governments and powerful corporations, impact and change culture due to their enormous influence. The government could tomorrow, although this would be hard to enforce, go, all right, no more fireworks, we're canceling 4th of July. They can do that tomorrow. The government can also switch our economic system to a non-capitalist system, which some people have accused them of already doing when we own AIG. I mean, at one point, you, the American taxpayers, owned 4 or 5 of the largest corporations on earth. And you don't even get any dividends for it either. It's good to own a company and not have any say. I mean, if I had my say, Chrysler would have went out of business 20 years ago. I mean, man, you can't make cars that sell? What are you doing? Cars sell themselves if you make them good enough. Go ask Ferrari. They're not advertising. Go ask Maserati, who even advertises even less, right? Or Lotus and all this other stuff. Rolls-Royce ain't hurting for customers, are they? When you make quality cars, people come to you. Go ask Mercedes. People crawl over their dead grandmothers to get in one of those cars. I have no idea why. I would say that anybody who buys a German car, do the research on these companies. Porsche provided jet engines to the Nazis. Volkswagen was a Nazi-founded company. Okay? When you're driving on an Autobahn, I want you to think about that too. Okay? But I think that's a good example. I actually go to the Nazi example. Think about how quickly the government and the culture changed in Germany when the Nazis got into power. How they suspended rights. How they outlawed the Communist Party. They ended democracy in that country. They started a militarist state. Just like that. Now, it doesn't mean just because the government or a corporation changes things that the people are going to put up with it, right? Like, for example, let me show you something that's even maybe a small example of culture, but it's at least behavioral culture. People eat and drink, and even drink beer on the trains, right? L-I-R-R. They are now trying to outlaw this. Have fun! You're going to hire food police? Here's the problem. You hire somebody to enforce a law, do you think they believe in it? Do you really think they're going to enforce a law that they don't believe in? It reminds me of Prohibition. There were people who were hired to enforce that law who were like, I don't even believe in this law. They're like, this is the dumbest crap in the world, but I'm going to do my job. And back then in the 20s, people were, unlike now where people are like, oh, I'll take the pay, but I'm not going to do the work, right? Back then it was like, I got a sense of duty and I'm going to do my job no matter what it is. And it's like, what? So you would go arrest your friends for drinking on their graduation day because it's a dry country. Are you trying to tell me? You'd arrest your own grandmother because she's drinking beer.
What happens when they have like those people, you know, like undercover, they send them in
To what?
to like, well, when I worked at the gas station.
Oh, you mean like cigarettes and stuff?
Yeah, for like cigarettes and like, you know, ask them for their ID and get like some $5,000 fine or something stupid and your license.
But some of those people probably enjoy that job. Maybe not. I'll tell you, I'll tell you a job that probably nobody enjoys: parking enforcement. Do you really want to be the one who's seen walking away from a car after you just wrote somebody an $80 ticket? Or the one who calls the tow truck company? Right? Yeah. At least with a cop, you got a gun. And you actually stop criminals every once in a while, right? Yeah. It's like Observer Report or Paul Blart, the mall cop, or whatever. And if you've ever seen an Observer Report, man, that's a twisted. Seth Rogen's got something wrong. He needs to be in a cell with a straight gang. Something wrong with that guy. Seriously. Or maybe there's nothing wrong with him. I don't know. When you do a movie like Superbad and Pineapple Express and Observer Report, and they ain't the only ones he did. Okay? Didn't he do one where he had a one-night stand, he got a woman pregnant, and they had to marry her? Yeah, Knocked Up. And I love the name of it too, right? There's no tact whatsoever. It's Knocked Up. Right? You wouldn't even have heard that kind of language in the 50s on television. I mean, Lucille Ball got pregnant, and they couldn't even say with child. They had to like put grocery bags and stuff in front of her stomach to hide it. You couldn't even say pregnant on TV. You couldn't. There was a time before 1980 that the word cancer was a dirty word. Like if you blurted that out in public, people were like, "What the hell's wrong with you? Like, what are you ruining my day for by saying that word?" You know, HIV was similar. Dare talk about that in polite company. Anyway. Number 3, social institutions are instrumental in producing and reproducing as well as giving legitimacy to cultural values and ideological systems. The key goal for most social institutions and for the culture at large, and particularly for elites, is to get the public to do what? In regards to institutions and culture. Cultures are rules, remember? Cultures are rules and value systems. What is the ultimate goal if you're the president or you're a federal bureaucrat or you're a military official or you're a corporate executive? What's your job? What's your goal in regards to that? What do you want people to do? What do you want the average person to do when they come across capitalism or democracy? Yeah. You want them to internalize it. Be like, yes, this is part of who I am. And what's so dangerous if people don't do that? What do we call these people? Huh? Well, maybe in rebels, right? Counterculture. Like, I doubt the Hells Angels are interested in capitalism unless it can make them rich. And then I doubt if the Hells Angels get rich, they're going to build orphanages. Right? They're not going to give their money to the church either. And they're not going to give it to the government. And there's plenty of groups like this. During the 1960s, the institutions did a very bad job of socializing young people into these value systems. One of the reasons why was, can anybody tell me why young suburban white kids who grew up in an affluent household, who were told that everybody should be treated equal and everybody has an equal opportunity in the United States is the greatest country on earth, why they didn't believe that? Huh? All right, so what did that tell people? So America, their parents were saying, this is what America is. Everybody's equal. Not only that, right? You have race, but what else also made people second-class citizens? Sort of. That's an elite element, but I'm talking something more fundamental. How about gender? Right? Little white girls in the suburbs, and African American and Latino parents told their kids the same thing about America, too. Now, it's probably a little bit different for African Americans to say, hey, this is the promise. We haven't reached it yet. For white suburbanites, especially in the 50s, it was, hey, we have arrived. Here we are. And I think a lot of, especially African American families, were looking at the white family down the street, or a couple blocks away, because they weren't in the same neighborhood, going, hey, how come that dude just bought a new house and I don't get nothing? I work just as hard. And so, especially when white suburban kids went to college, what happened to their view of America as being beautiful and special and would never ignore anybody or push anybody down, and everybody's got equal rights in this country, and anybody can be president? Was that true in 1962? I mean, it took till 1960 just to get somebody who was a Catholic in the presidency. Because people thought he was going to listen to the Pope. I'm not kidding you. You watch when Romney gets the nomination, they will talk ad nauseum about Mormonism. So what happened when these kids went to college? What did they see? Let me put it another way. What do you think they learned in a liberal-oriented political science class? Or how about, does every type of socialization on campus take place in the classroom, or are there other things going on outside? I know on this campus it's hard to understand. But if you go to a campus like Columbia University or Ohio State University or Florida State or University of Michigan or University of Akron or Penn State or Kent State, what is there that there's not here? There's a lot more places to gather, and it's a much more of a residential, like at the University of Michigan, I think there's 45,000 students who go there. What can you do with 45,000 students you can't do with what? There's 6,000 here? What can you do politically, socially with 45,000 young students, wealthy suburban students? You can start a social movement organization. You can make a difference. You can make a stink. You can clamor up and get in people's faces. And if they're not teaching you what you want to learn in the classroom, then you have teach-ins. That's what they start to be called. Where it's, hey, if maybe a professor runs it, or a young professor or something, and he gets some activist students together and says, you know what? This is what's going on in Vietnam. Or this is what's going on in the South. Or this is what's going on with women. And you need to know the truth. And the truth called into question the promises. And I think for a lot of Americans, they looked around in the 60s and said, and looked at their parents' generation, this is very much a generational battle, and said, you are a bunch of liars. And now you're trying to draft me into a war to fight some fake enemy in Vietnam when other people don't want me over there. And on top of that, you don't even give me the right to vote till I'm 21. How dare you send me off to die and not even give me the right to vote? That was one of the big issues right there. Right. No, at the time, you could drink at 19. Yeah, I love that. Now we're reverse the situation. You can go die. You can at least vote, but you can go die out in Somalia somewhere or Afghanistan, but you can't have a drink before you die. Although I'll tell you right now, anybody who thinks 19-year-olds don't drink when they're in the U.S. Army, I'm talking to you, Army. Don't bullshit me, Army. I know how much they make as much money on beers as they do at Met Stadium. What's a beer go for at Met Stadium? $12? It's flat, nasty, watered down garbage. Gotta drink water out of my shoe. At least at the U.S. Open, they're classy. They got vodka on their backs. I'm telling you, they have these things with, it's like it's Grey Goose vodka. It's not some cheap Smirnoff. It's been contaminated by Chernobyl or something. Anyway. But if you look at all these institutions that are involved. For example, capitalism is this. Let's just take capitalism. Discussed, supported, and disseminated by schools. Business schools teach people that this is what you do to make money. This is how Steve Jobs did it. This is how Mark Zuckerberg did it. Although they probably don't talk about Zuckerberg at Harvard. They're like, look, just make sure you pay Harvard all the money and get your Latin written degree before you leave, because we can't keep having to go. It's almost like you're more successful if you drop out of Harvard than if you stay in it. I mean, two of the most successful and wealthiest people in the world dropped out of Harvard after like the first 2 years. Bill Gates, and I bet because when he did it, there was no Mark Zuckerberg and there was no Bill Gates. So when he did it, I bet his parents were like, "You did what?" "Oh, I dropped out of Harvard so I could start a computer company in my basement." And you're like, "You're not doing it in our basement." I mean, his parents were probably like, you ever seen the previews or this movie Failure to Launch with Matthew McConaughey? It was like that. Like, dude, you're living in the basement, you're getting a paper route. Or working at a restaurant. I assure you his parents were not happy about that. It couldn't have been, right? Anyway, and then he goes on to steal Steve Jobs and Wozniak's operating system and turns it into DOS. So everything turned out well for Bill Gates so far. And now that his nemesis is in the grave, I'm sure he's feeling real good about that. He can't, him and Jobs, I would have loved to see them go through it. It should be UFC 158 or something. I would have loved to see Steve Jobs and Bill Gates. There'd been a lot of slapping. I'm going to pull your pocket protector off. Anyway, I'm going to take that glasses off your tape. Or your glass, tape off your glasses. See, I'm going to have to edit that. Anyway, capitalism is supported by the public as a whole. Do Americans, for the most part, even though that capitalism may have harmed them in the past, do they think there's a better system? Is communism better? Doesn't look like it. Go ask China. They abandoned. They were like, yep, see you later. All right, Mao, you were cool for a little while, but you know what? We really like all this stuff that we're getting from the United States. So, anyway, their country's going to be as trash as ours pretty soon, if not worse. And the government as well. Hey, look, does the government stop people from making money? They might tax them, but do they stop them? And you hear repeatedly, okay, look, let's take President Bush. He's a Republican. Did he support capitalism? Regardless of what he did. Did he support capitalism with his mouth? Yeah, he did. That's why he cut taxes on wealthy people and businesses. Obama's a Democrat. Surely he doesn't support capitalism. Yeah, he does. And part of the reason why people love capitalism is that both capitalism and democracy work on the meritocracy. What's that mean? Why is that important to Americans? This goes back to the stuff in the 1960s. What suburban white kids were mad about and that forced the hand of the government on civil rights and a whole host of issues, what was that? It was the meritocracy. What's that mean?
That you move forward in your achievements based on your aptitudes and your ability.
Right, not just who you know, not what your last name is, not how much money your daddy had, Paris Hilton, not what kind of car you're driving, not what school you went to. Sheer will, strength, energy, innovativeness, creativeness. Mark Zuckerberg didn't ask. Now, let me be clear about Mark Zuckerberg. Do you think he was homeless and begging for food when he went to Harvard? Yeah. He was pretty well off. He wasn't a billionaire or nothing, but his family was pretty comfortable from the biographical information that I read. But it doesn't mean that he's. What I love about that is that Zuckerberg could have just went to school, got his degree in Latin, written in Latin, not in Latin. You know, went and worked for a corporation or sat on his trust fund money and done nothing. But he chose, and I actually respect him for this, even though he's kind of a slime ball. He chose, like, what's this? I'm going to go out there and I'm going to do things you've never seen. I'm going to steal MySpace's idea. And my friend's idea, too. And then I'm going to say it was all mine. And then Justin Timberlake's going to play me in a movie. Because that's just how good looking I am. Anyway, isn't that who played him? Or he played his friend? Who played Zuckerberg? Oh, okay. Right, because he had the curly hair. Anyway, I bet Justin Timberlake showed that guy a good time. Anyway, you always have fun when Timberlake's around. But again, this idea that you earn, not that I know personally, but that you earn your place in this world by effort and by talent and creativity. Why is that a good way to run a society versus just giving things to... Like it really is the crux of why do monarchies fail? They do well for a while. What is the success of the monarchy based on? King George found this out. It really speaks to the power of the meritocracy, and when it doesn't work, what happens? What is the success of a monarch based on? Or a monarchy itself? Not the wealth, but actually, believe it or not, if he's intelligent, if he's smart, if he knows how to rule. You get a bad monarch in the kingship, it's over. Right? It is over. Remember what here's the proof. What did Marie Antoinette tell the serfs when they were starving? Yeah, let them eat cake. And they said, you know what? How would you like a steel blade coming down on your head? Somebody should have told her not to be a smartass. But that's the problem when you have... Obviously, she was a complete idiot. So I think when the movie was played by Kirsten Dunst. Was she an idiot in the movie? They portray her as an idiot or just a jerk?
She literally had like 2 lines of dialogue.
Right.
It was all about how pretty it was and how good it was to be her.
What was the name of the movie?
Marie Antoinette.
But she only had 2 lines.
the whole movie only had like 2 lines. It was
Stupid.
it was literally just about.
Did they show her getting her head cut off at the end, at least?
No, it was
See?
about when she was younger.
Delusional nonsense. That's why England got rid. That's why these Prince William and Harry, and they used to claim Harry Pothead because they caught him out back in the shed one time. That's why these royals don't have any power. Prince Charles, first of all, will never get it. He will never be king. Maybe if he gets a year job, but he'll never be king because he's a disgrace. And the British people in general, they actually they're sort of proud of the tradition of the monarchy, but the monarchy to them is like a big joke. They're like the Hiltons, and you just keep making fun of them. Like, it's like the Kardashians. The royal family's like the Kardashians. They're a bunch of inbred, overfed idiots who don't know anything about life and who insult people at every turn and spend $3,000 on a handbag and think that that's justifiable when most people don't make that in a month. And they still don't understand why people dislike them. I mean, that's how delusional royal people can be. And celebrities in the country are almost a factor. Like Paris Hilton is a form of corporate royalty, right? No matter what she does, she will, unless her parents cut her off, she will always have money. I heard that I've seen her net worth with her inheritance listed as $300 million. Let me tell you one thing she won't ever do: run that company. You know who's going to do that? The son. And that should be somewhat offensive to some of you ladies. That Nikki and Paris are these goofy models, and Nikki's way less of a goofball than Paris. Okay, she actually has some respect for stuff. But the son, I can't remember his name, will run the company. Do you ever hear anything about him? Did you see him taking his top off at like Coyote Wild or something like that? Or stripping at Chippendales, or having sex tapes? Right? And also, what's interesting, for example, Ivanka Trump's going to take over her father's things. Have you ever seen her naked in Playboy? Or act like a fool, or on drugs, acting like an idiot, or hanging around with Nicole Richie? Not that there's anything wrong with Nicole Richie. Well, there is, but anyway, I don't have time to get into that. That would take about 10 years. The family also supports capitalism. Your dad, your mom tells you, hey, the reason why this country's great, the reason why we got air conditioning in the summer, and the reason why we can get any type of food at any time of the year, or the reason why we own our home, or the reason why you have a job, or why you're going to college, because capitalism works and we believe in it. Except for those things called depressions. So that doesn't happen that often. Bubbles, depressions, that doesn't happen. That's all imaginary. Right? But people are willing to accept the fact that capitalism causes inequality. Capitalism many times causes poverty. Capitalism allows things that, like tobacco, that is bad for people's health, to be sold in stores with absolutely no problem whatsoever, for the most part, of the heavy taxes. Okay? I mean, do they really think $9 a pack is enough to stop a nicotine addict? I mean, you're talking, I don't know what the price of cocaine is. I would assume it's like $100 a gram. That ain't enough to stop people from doing coke, and you're violating the law by doing that. You're going to raise the price of cigarettes to $9, you're just going to keep homeless people from smoking them. Yeah, they smoke less. Anyway, the family, religious institutions even support capitalism. I'm telling you. I mean, you will hear, if you ever saw the movie Capitalism, A Love Story by Michael Moore, he went and interviewed some Catholic priests, and they said that, I think he interviewed his priest. And Michael Moore goes, is capitalism evil? And the guy goes, yeah, right now it is. But that doesn't mean that, I'll tell you right now, if you actually look at it, the church was one of the staunchest anti-communist forces in the world. The Pope was instrumental in dismantling communism in Poland, because he was from Poland, and they felt that communism was an atheistic system. Okay? And that with an atheistic system, religion would be gone. All right, but let's get through this because we're taking too much time. In the media, obviously, they sell objects, they support these things. Capitalism is an integral part of American culture, like democracy, and is based on the rationalization of society and the coming of the modern urban, suburban, and industrial world. And capitalism is based on this one thing that Adam Smith talked about. But he also said that if you didn't have a moral public, this wouldn't work. That I have an interest in the marketplace, maybe I want to get food, and you want clothes. I've got clothes, you got food. We exchange. And you throw currency in there, it makes it a lot easier. Now I can, if you don't have food, but you've got currency, that I can go trade for food. You can give me the currency, I give you the clothes. It's brilliant, right? And the more people who are involved in it, the more efficient the market becomes. The problem is capitalism has issues like monopolies. Okay, it gets too colluded with the government. It's an abusive system. It can lead to, look at the factory systems in China, right? Look at Walmart. Look how Walmart, when they come into a town, they annihilate mom and pop stores. Because the plumbing store can't deal with them, the pharmacy can't deal with them. Walmart is so big and bad, they put other box retailers like Walmart on their toes. Or Walgreens or CVS. They got them backed into a corner. Even, like, Walmart's now selling groceries, so is Target. They got Walt Bombs and King Cullen and Stop and Shop scared to death. If you can't compete with Walmart, they will annihilate you. And I'll tell you right now, we'll get into this when we get into the next section. Walmart's goal is to take over the earth. I'm telling you right now. They want to be the largest company on earth. If they could have an army, there's no doubt in my mind they'd have one. They have, like, I want to say in America, at least 2 billion employees. They have been kicked out of several countries, including South Korea and Germany, because they don't allow unions. Anyway, and in China they have Walmart. The Chinese are like, we're just going to steal your idea. What do you think of it? The Chinese are like, wait, hey Walmart, we don't need you here because we make all the garbage we sell to you right here, so we can just start another store called Walmart and kick your ass out. What do you think about that, Walmart? They met their match in China, didn't they? Like, man, we thought we were cheap. Look at these guys. They don't even pay people enough to drink water. Anyway, 4. Many times traditional ideas like outdated religious or pseudo-scientific views can hold back the social progress in a society until another institution like art, economics, government, or the media stand up to challenge and displace these ideas. This is what occurred in the time period from the late Middle Ages to now. Slowly, bad ideas that existed for years were slowly chipped away at by other institutions and gained momentum until eventually new standards and cultural values replaced them. Like democracy. It used to be there were absolutely, once Roman democracy disappeared, there were virtually no democracies on the planet. Believe it or not, the oldest running parliamentary democracy in the Western world is in Iceland. It's been there for about 700 years. And even then, I don't think he stepped out of line with Chile. Those were Vikings that founded that place. So Vikings usually not in the mood to get it on. Their argument ends with a sword going through someone's gut. Okay. Believe it or not, I think the Vikings were some of the first people to visit Japan, and I can imagine what the Japanese people thought of these people wearing these gigantic horns, 6'9", carrying a gigantic sword almost as big as they were. So anyway, it must have been frightening. Also the church. The church slowly lost power based on things like the fact that they couldn't explain why people got sick. And that they kept people in ignorance because the Bible was in Latin. And they denied things like science for years. And for the longest time, if you were to say that the sun was the center of the solar system, that would get you killed. I mean, that's something that simple. Right? You didn't dare say that, hey, I saw the priest over at the local brothel. Right? Unless he goes, hey, kid, shut up. Here's 5 gold pieces. Be quiet. Okay? Be like, you can be my lookout. Anyway. I actually saw statistics that said that, I don't know how they have to survey information, 44% of all priests and nuns are sexually active. So, there you go. Anyway. Number 5, individuals also impact and change culture either from the grassroots level, like social movements that we talked about, the progressive movement, or the 1960s, or by individuals becoming elites or groups of people taking over governments, like Lenin did with the government, or like Hitler did with the government. And sometimes it can be very bad change. Or how about the Iranian Revolution, right? How about when the Taliban took over Afghanistan? I don't think the Afghan people on the whole agreed with that. All right? So you can take over one small part of the government and control an institution, and you can alter things completely. Think about the changes Bill Gates and Steve Jobs combined. Now, I know they hate each other, but if you take those 2 people combined, think of the changes that they have caused in technology and our everyday life. You know, even people like Zuckerberg, who sort of stole an idea and refashioned it, right? Your lives have been changed by Apple Computer. Not only by the impact they've had on Apple computers, but think about it. Apple Computer initiated change in the BlackBerry and in regular, like now you get these Samsung phones that are all touch and stuff like that, right? They've actually, Google has been sued by Apple because Apple claims that they took some of their operating systems and little touch stuff too. Like Google's coming at them. Google's saying, hey, we see what you're doing, we're going to copy it and we're going to make it better. And Google's probably the only company besides Facebook that can probably take Apple down, and Facebook has no interest in taking Apple down, because why does Facebook have no interest in taking Apple down? They're in with each other. Every single iPad and iPhone has a Facebook app on it, doesn't it? You just push the button, it takes you right to Facebook, doesn't it? You don't even have to log in. Right? YouTube too. What's funny is that Google owns YouTube. So they sort of got, that's their big gun in the background, you know. Because YouTube is still, most sites die after 3 or 4 years. YouTube has been an important and a dynamic site since the beginning. And now it's becoming commercial. Like, you know, at least I have to hand it to YouTube. At least when you click on YouTube, the pop-up video the sound doesn't come on. You have to actually click it. Whereas if you go to ESPN and you have the speaker on, boom! See the highlights from the next game, win the next game. It's like, shut up! I got in the computer to stay away from noise sometimes. So turn the speaker off. Anyway. Social institutions have changed over time. They have become more complex. They have become, on some levels, more flexible, and yet some levels more inflexible. But some of the things that have happened is, for example, we've moved from traditional to more religious or single institution-dominated societies to more modern societies where multiple institutions dominate, to postmodern society where people don't trust institutions anymore. And so the most important aspect is their what is more, not what I can do for institutions or I believe what they say, but how can I use these institutions to get what I want? Like, for example, it's the stockbroker who wants to make $5 million before the time he's 30, so he can do what? Yeah, and so if you're retiring at 30, are you really adding to the system? Are you a productive individual? No. You've used the system, you sucked the blood out, and now you're going to go move to Montana or Switzerland. And you buy stuff, but you're not going to be, you're not helping capitalism along, you're not really being part of the larger system, which is really odd, but that's part of what's happening. But back to traditional societies, this is very much controlled by informal institutions and run by traditional values and views of the world. The tribe contained all the institutions, and most people in the tribe did not specialize or have formal social roles. Although they were better, normally in a tribe, particularly these Clovis tribes that used to make these arrowhead points that were very distinctive, that you can find all over the place, which, by the way, they've traced back to Europe, believe it or not. And this was before Columbus and the Vikings and stuff. They had specific people who were experts at that. But that was like the one guy who did that, okay? And then you had the chief. And many times the chief was also what? In the tribe. What other roles did he have? Let me put it this way. Is the president also head of the religious organizations in the United States? Is many times the tribal leader, the spiritual leader as well, and he gets into a trance. Think also, here's an element of rationalization, right? We have this idea of rationalization, that it's rational thought and logic, right? That, hey, we should move from Florida because it's hurricane season. And the irrational thing would be, you know what, I ripped open a chicken last night, and the innards didn't say that moving to Georgia was a good idea, so we're not going. Or, if it was like the Navajo tribe, the head of the tribe would get into a peyote-induced hallucinogenic state, and then start going, and the spirits talked to me, and they said blah, 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 blah. Could you imagine if the president came on TV and said, you know what, I had a talk with some angels last night. They're really nice people. Right? Got the halo and the wings. Right? And they said that I should cut taxes. And attack Iran. And North Korea. Can you imagine if the President of the United States started making decisions based on psychics and his astrological forecast and what phase of the moon it was? And had to go ask the Pope or his minister what to do? Could you imagine the firestorm that would cause in the press? Are you kidding me? Or Steve Jobs said, you know what? I talked to a Cherokee tribal leader today, and he said that I should abandon the iPad. So I'm going to do it. You see, when you pull it out, I think these examples help you understand the power of rational thought. But not only does it work, but if you express non-rational things, you are subject to ridicule. There's no doubt about it. Anybody who tries, now in church you can sit there and say, I talk to angels, right? But again, it makes people sound crazy. Right? Oh, you talk to God, huh? You hear voices in your head a lot? Are you okay? Do you get dizzy? You get hit the head? I mean, that's the kind of stuff you're going to get. You go into work and tell them you talk to your guardian angel, and he said, I deserve a promotion. He'd be like, yeah, here's your promotion. Go outside that door and never come back. You're promoted to being unemployed. Okay? Because you're a goofball and we don't need people like you around. Or, reminds me of like Coming to America. Son, I'm going to say this one time. Stay off the drugs. Or like Waterboy. And that brings me to my next point. Don't smoke crack. Anyway. Lawrence Taylor's got more problems than smoking crack. He needs to keep his hands off the prostitutes, underage prostitutes too. Religious dominated societies. During the Middle Ages, the church dominated and controlled and set rules for all other social institutions. The church determined what was allowed to be considered the truth in school, and if you were to challenge it, you would be dealt with severely, many times including execution. The church kept people ignorant of the rational world, and the church did not have all the answers, so what it did was create this tension that the priest was saying, hey, do this, and nothing bad will happen, and I do this, and then somebody just raided my village. You didn't help me. So they eventually started to go, you know what? You don't know anything. And you've been lying to us. It reminds me of the way in the 1960s people started to realize that politicians were liars instead of trustworthy individuals. Like, hey, wait, you're just saying that to get elected. And that's what people started to realize about the church. They were like, hey, you're just saying that so I don't punch you in the face. You just keep lying to me because you know if you told me the truth, you wouldn't have any more power. And until the Gutenberg Bible, which was printed in German, and which Martin Luther took, the Bible was written in Latin for the longest time, and it was done so that the priest could control the facility. See, it says here, I can sleep with your wife on Thursday. It's like, what? I'm like, no, you got to give me your house after you get done finishing. You know, I mean, that kind of crap was going on. Like, hey, you can self-forgiveness for sins and things. Number 3, on the other hand, modern societies, post-Renaissance, post-Enlightenment, where individual values and individual rights were expressed, and capitalism became a much more important aspect of the economy. We have this element here that a myriad of institutions control different segments, and that the dominant social institutions here are schools that spread science and knowledge, and a lot of discoveries come from schools. Also, economic institutions, capitalism, and political institutions, particularly secular monarchies or democracies. I think it's hard for people to realize, especially when you've been living in this country for a long time, that most countries had monarchies up until the 1920s. The Russian government was controlled by a czar until 1913. And I remember talking to a Russian one time, I was like, I remember, and I probably shouldn't have posed it like this, I said, isn't it weird that your country was controlled by a monarchy? And he goes, it's so big deal. And I said, that is a big deal. It's a backwards form of government. He goes, it wasn't to us. Okay? And then postmodern, where the individual is the center of attention, where institutions are just to be used. All right. One last moment, one last thing before we go here. I want to get to rationalization. We'll continue here the next time. And this will feed into our description of the timeline. So remember, chapters 1 and 2 for next time. Rationalization, there's a definition on 64 and 65, but to add to that, Max Weber, who dealt with a lot of works in sociology of religion, government, he dealt with a lot of organizational theory with bureaucracy, claims that not only does rationalization help institutions become more efficient by creating a procedure, a logical, linear procedure about this is how you file paperwork, this is how you plant crops, this is how you make steel, all these types of things. This is how you determine what causes disease. He also said there's a downside here. The rationalization makes ends of means and imprisons the individuals within the iron cage of rationalized institutions, organizations, and activities. This is sort of that element where you go to the DMV and be like, hey, who do I need to talk to about getting this done? Well, it's not me. I can't help you. I wish I could. I'm sure you guys have gone over here to the administration. People tossed you around from person to person or said, I can't do anything about it. That's the rule. You missed the deadline. All that kind of stuff. That instead of making decisions, people just default to the procedures. And it creates a very impersonal aspect to it. And we'll talk about that on Wednesday. Now, Weber had, there's two ways to look at this. There's Weber's way and then there's a symbolic interactionist way. With the symbolic interactionist perspective, rationalization becomes a way of people explaining their behavior that might be out of the ordinary. Also, that we use rational thought in our own lives to determine what's best for us. Okay? What job fits for me, right? Also, even things like happiness become rational concepts, don't they? Or some form of it. That my definition of happiness might be different than yours, but they're similar. And that comes out of democracy and capitalism. I can almost assure you that if I was asking what happiness means, it would probably have to do with things like having a family that cares about you, having a job that you enjoy, having a home that you like, maybe having some pets, going on vacation to certain places, maybe being able to practice your own religion. These are all things that are part of American culture. And you'll see that. So the term is used in two different ways again here. The concept of rationalization was developed by Weber. First, it was the process through which magical, supernatural, and religious ideas lose cultural importance in a society, and ideas based on science and practical calculation become dominant. Here's the example. In some other cultures, for example, here's an example, weather is thought to express the pleasure or displeasure of gods. We don't think. Could you imagine if the meteorologist came on and said, "Let's hope God doesn't make it rain tomorrow." Everybody start don't do the anti-rain dance, right? And what's funny is that you can go to Native American reservations and they'll do this rain dance. Now they don't believe that. Some of them actually believe they can make it rain. Okay, but they don't really believe that that's what's occurring. Some of them do. But they do it because it connects them to their past, and it's a part of their cultural heritage. Just the way, Christians put out things for Santa Claus. Santa Claus ain't real. He ain't coming down the chimney. He ain't eating no cookies. He's not putting anything in your stocking. Okay? And also as well, like if you're Jewish, for Passover, people put out wine for Elijah. Some people even open the door. Elijah's supposed to come in and announce the coming of the Messiah. Most Jewish people know that Elijah's not hanging out at their house. But it's part of their cultural heritage. The real Passover was actually, does anybody know what the first Passover, what they did? Yeah, so that the spirits who were coming to kill the firstborn children of Egypt would spare their children. They were taking blood and smearing it all over their door. I'm all about that. Let's get back to that. That's I like the ash thing on Wednesday, though. That's good. I told you the first time I saw that, I thought it was a smudge on someone's head. I was going to roll out on the window and go, whoa, 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 you got... Baptists don't do that. But again, and then rationalization also involves the development of forms of social organization devoted to the achievement of precise goals by efficient means. And then on top of that is that singular issue that how does rationalization operate in your own individual life? All right, we're running out of time. All right, sorry I went over a minute over. Make sure to read from the timeline. We'll start back at the slideshow here. Then we'll go through these concepts because it's going to be important when we come along and talk about corporate culture. Well, most of you haven't worked for a major corporation at the higher level, so you don't know what these places are like, what type of pressure they put on you. What we're going to do today, like I said, we're going to watch a documentary. It's a biography, an A&E biography special, that not only looks at Adolf Hitler's early upbringing and some of the things that may have contributed to his aspects of his personality that are somewhat deviant, and then eventually to his behavior. And again, one of the things you have to keep in mind is that it's one thing to have a mass murderer in your society, it's another thing when he's the president or the dictator or whatever, or a military leader, or whatever, even something like Ted Bundy or Jim Jones, a religious leader or something. That's a whole nother level, exponential level of damage that could be done to society once an individual gets a hold of the mechanisms of power. And in the first two chapters, it talks about Adolf's early upbringing of the book, and it talks about some of the struggles that he went through, where some aspects of his personality came from. This will back up a lot of what was said and go into even more detail. This one also compares Hitler's life to Stalin, and one of the reasons why I think that's such an effective technique to use here is that, and they use something what's called psychohistory, looking at people's psychology and how it's impacted by history, and also how history is impacted by the psychology of important people, or at least powerful people. And they compare Hitler's life to Stalin, and there's some startling similarities. And also the fact is that both these men ended up eventually killing millions of people, being directly and indirectly accused of and causing the deaths of, in Hitler's case, anywhere near from 60 to 70 million people, and in Stalin's case, 20, and I've heard as high as 50 million of his own people that he sent to the Gulag and executed. He also killed one of his wives and many of his family members. He had some serious problems. One of the reasons why the German army was able to make such great advances into the Soviet frontier during 1941 was not only the fact that Stalin was taken off guard, and he was so narcissistic to think he wasn't going to get attacked. He was essentially mentally paralyzed for a few weeks. But also the fact is that Stalin had purged his best generals and some of his best political operatives because he considered them to be a threat to his power, and he felt that, since he was a narcissist, that if I haven't figured it out, it's not worth figuring it out, so we don't need these people around. But again, he had to scramble to find new generals once the Nazis invaded.